I'm Kolesen McCoy, president of the National FFA organization, and I have a question for you. Have you ever met someone, a total stranger, never seen him before, who turned out to be a really big deal? Well, this happened to me just a few short months ago at the end of January when the National FFA officer team and I found ourselves in Washington, D.C. If you've ever been to D.C. before, you know that there's about 1 billion escalators all over the city. And so we're there sitting in this lounge area of the hotel, and over here is a fireplace and mantle, and the front desk is just here. And we're sitting around these couches and chairs. In the distance, I see one of these escalators that I'm talking about. And of course, we're notorious for going up and down them, but up one of the escalators comes this gentleman. I don't quite recognize him at first, but he walks over to me, shakes my hand, and about crushes every bone in my hand. And he says, "Mr. President, sir, it's an honor to meet you. I am Arnie Fields." Take it back a little bit. Mr. Fields, "Yes, sir, reporting, sir. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. President." And so I had to kind of process for a moment, but I hadn't made the connection because turns out this gentleman wasn't just any Mr. Fields. This was a 4-star retired Major General in the United States Marine Corps, Arnie Fields. And so I'm thinking, like, first reaction, why in the world is this guy addressing me as sir? I did a little bit of research. Turns out he was one of the last national officers in the NFA prior to their organization merging with the FFA in the 1960s. Did a little bit more research, and turns out the NFA also had a creed. We have a creed. It's 5 paragraphs long, all beginning with the words, "I believe." And there's a particular line in the NFA creed that's always stood out to me, and I've really enjoyed it, and it's something that Major General Fields had referenced a number of times in his tenure with the United States Marine Corps. And it's, "A life of service is a life that counts." A life of service is a life that counts. And I thought that to be some pretty good wisdom, because when we look back in history at some of the greatest leaders, the names that we pull from the timeline, names like Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, there's a common theme that all these people share. And it's that the greatest leaders in history did not come to be served themselves, but to serve and give their life a ransom for those around them. Every day, especially in high school, we make decisions that are going to influence what we do and who we are setting ourselves up to be. It should be our greatest hope that we can look back in a lens of grace at our younger self and smile because of the work that we did to be there for those around us. Now, interestingly enough, in the core of who we are as human beings, research shows that one of our most basic desires is community or fellowship with one another. But don't take my word for that, or Google's for that matter. Let's look at our own life. What are some of the biggest things that we miss the most right now? Things like Friday night football with friends, who we sat with at lunch, family gatherings and family traditions, who we called up to play Fortnite or Super Smash Bros. With. You might be doing that right now. And who we sent memes to in the middle of class. Look, the list goes on and on, but the point is, if there's anything that we can be certain of, it's that everyone in the world has a basic desire and need to be a part of a community, which presents the question, and perhaps this is something new to consider: is there a solution in filling the need of that community by simply being available to it? And if so, what does that look like? Let's check that out. So availability is defined as a state of being otherwise unoccupied or free to do something. Now, the state of being otherwise unoccupied has 1 to 2 side effects, according to the most reliable website, WebMD. 1, excessive TikTok exposure, you know what I'm talking about. And 2, we become very creative and oftentimes mischievous with this time that we are otherwise unoccupied. Mom and Dad walk into the living room and say, "Hey, listen, we are going to leave this room for 5 minutes. Please, whatever you do, just sit still and be quiet." What are we going to do? Well, we're definitely not going to sit still, and we for sure ain't going to be quiet. And I'm talking to anybody out there with a mullet and a pair of pliers and a hip holster who spent more time in the shop than they do in the classroom. Shop guys, you know what's up. You know what I'm talking about. Believe me, I've seen the chaos unfold there. And so much so that we see this play out in oftentimes all different parts of our lives. And there was a particular Saturday in the fall of 2019 where I was otherwise unoccupied. And we all know that Saturdays are for that's right, family gatherings, Ohio FFA, family gatherings. And I told myself on this particular Saturday that one, I love my family, as crazy as they are, and I wanted to spend some time with them. But if I were to do that, I had to finish writing a paper that was due in class later that week. And so the day just kind of unfolds, but in the back of my mind, what's there, right? Finish that paper. Finish that paper. And this plays over and over and over again. And let's set the scene. You ever see National Lampoon's Vacation? Take that, mix it with the meme of the lady who's like pointing at the cat across the table and like bawling her eyes out. Put those two things together, you get the perfect recipe for a McCoy family gathering. And like every great recipe, you have ingredients that pop up frequently. Things like flour that I associate to my cousins because they just kind of get into everything. And of course, the sugar is who? Yeah, my grandmother, who walks in the front door, gives me a kiss on the cheek, a hug, and gives me this mug, true story, it's got an FFA emblem on it, and says, made with love, along the bottom. And let's be real. The greatest hype people in the world are not motivational speakers. They are grandmothers on Facebook and Instagram. It's just the honest truth. And so last but not least, the eggs, right? The eggs. And I so easily correlate the eggs to my uncles because no one actually knows why they're there unless you're like a food scientist. But they just kind of show up and the recipe calls for it, so you're just stuck with them. And throughout this whole day, all this unfolding, what's still in the back of my mind? Yeah, finish that paper. I have to finish that paper. And I'm willing to bet we've all had a moment where we struggled to find the balance between our relationships and our work. And this internal battle of being pulled between these two worlds had followed me all the way up to later that evening and my friend Tyler. Now Tyler, I want you to picture walking up to your door. Open up your door. Standing before you is an old friend you've not seen in a really long time who says, I've got some big news to share with you. That friend for me was Tyler. So he's standing there, he's about 6'4", a big bushy beard and this teddy bear vibe about him. And he has some really big news, to share with me. And I'm now torn, and I'll ask you the same. If I had a choice between hanging out with my friend Tyler, catching up with an old pal, or going back and finishing homework, what do you think I'm gonna do? Yeah, I'm slamming the door shut in his face and finishing that homework. I'm kidding. But I would be lying if I didn't say I at least considered it for half a second. Because a big part of me wanted to finish writing that paper. And I'm torn between friend in front of me and paper just behind me, and friend and paper and friend and paper. I finally make the decision that I should probably spend some time with Tyler. And I can't express this enough. I'm so, so glad that I did. Because in the hour that we had together, I remembered how much it meant to catch up. How much that innate sense and that desire of a community and fellowship with an old pal that I felt like I really needed. It was so evident in my life. We talked about life. We talked about the struggles that we were facing in that particular season of our own lives. And all of this accumulated and built up to the big grand reveal that he was going to be getting married in a few short months. I would have completely missed that. I'm willing to bet we've all had a moment, and perhaps we're experiencing it right now in the season of life that we're in, where we had something that really humbled our heart and reminded us of what really matters in our life. Because that was a big moment for me. And I learned something very big that day, and something very powerful that will stick with me forever, and it's that there is always time in our day for something important. There's always time in our day for something important. Because that was a big decision. Was I going to choose to make myself available to an old friend, a pal of mine, just for a conversation, to catch up? And I had that choice lying before me. And I'm glad that I had. But if we were to be completely honest, if I were to look back on my own life, and we were to take an old film reel, one of those old with like the pictures kind of chopping down, and all the times of this long slide where I had made the decision not to be there for someone, I'm willing to bet there's probably a lot more times where I failed to do so. But if we pause that and we pull from it the picture-perfect moments, I'm talking about the memories that are so vivid in our mind, we just never forget. I guarantee you, those are the times when we chose to be there for another person, or someone chose to be there for us. And isn't that connection powerful? Isn't just the idea, the opportunity alone to serve someone just excite you? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that after we hear this, we have to go out into the world and do something profound every 5 seconds. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am asking is to examine and reflect, how do I spend my time? And does it reflect what truly is most important to me? Because there's always time in our day for something important. As we live our life, consider for a moment how we might make time for things that are important to us. Perhaps it's that sibling we're at odds with in the house right now because we're all cooped up and we got all this energy that we just need to expel somewhere. Or maybe it is the classmate who doesn't have someone reaching out to them right now to check in to see how they're doing. Perhaps it's them. Maybe it's thanking a veteran like Major General Arnie Fields, or a person on the front lines, a first responder, your ag teacher, for what they're doing to serve you all as students. The list goes on and on. But there's always time in our day for something important. We just have to find it, and we have to pursue it and make ourselves available to it. But what's the point of all this? If we don't ask why, we would be remiss, and we're missing out a big part of everything that we do in the FFA, the big why. So question. If, for example, I were to say, FFA members, why are we here? What would happen? We would instinctively stand up wherever we are. Maybe it's in the living room, in the bedroom, or the bathroom, or wherever we are. We'd stand up and we'd say, to practice brotherhood, honor agricultural opportunities and responsibilities, and develop those qualities of leadership which an FFA member should possess. Grab that gavel one more time, and we'd instinctively sit back down and be ready to go. Now, those qualities of leadership. It's my favorite line in the whole thing because it takes me back to a story. We're going to flash back all the way in the timeline to 2014. It's the grand opening of my high school, and I have one very simple mission that day. Give tours to people as they came in the front door. And I'd been doing it almost the whole day, and I was giving tours of, about 8 to 10 people in a group at any given time. And as they're coming in, I'm pointing out different things, but there was a window. It was a very packed and busy day. But there was a window where I had a chance to give a one-on-one tour, and I don't believe this happened by chance, with an elderly gentleman I would come to know as Chuck Marty. And Chuck was an alumnus of the school district who had previously owned the building. And this building, it had this dome, and it was cool. It was modeled off the Library of Congress, but when you stepped underneath the dome, the light would shine through it, and there were 10,000 individually stained pieces of glass. So as the light went through, it would just flood around you and shower you in this beautiful array of red and green and blue and orange and yellow and all these colors. And it was cool. It's modeled off the Library of Congress, right? It's neat. But I'd seen it like 100 times. And I'm going through the motions with this Chuck guy that I just met. I'm pointing out old things, and he's mentioning old funny stories or pranks that they did in various parts of the building. And we finally get to the staircase. It's a zigzag staircase that would go up 3 floors and make our way about 100 feet over to the dome, just to the right of us. And we're standing there, and of course, Chuck pulls out his phone to try to, I'm just kidding, there's no phones in this equation. He takes out one of those really old wind-up cameras, right? You can hear it, he winds it up, and he's trying to snap the different pictures that were there with the dome. And I saw that he was kind of struggling to get the right angle. There was a big fan in the way, and so I offered to take his camera, and I grab it, and here's where it gets interesting. I walk over, look below, and try to see a good angle for the dome, and I physically lay down. And so I snap a picture of the dome, and I hop back up, and I walk over to a completely stunned and shocked, mind blown, written all over this guy's face, of a Chuck Marty. And he looks at me and he says, "Kolesen, why in the world did you just do that?" And I turn to him well, Chuck, you asked for a photo, that's why. And he gets really serious for a moment, and he says, "Kolesen, no one's ever done that for me before. I can't believe it." Turns out, Chuck was a retired Navy veteran who's lived alone the majority of his life there in Springfield, Ohio, my hometown. And that dome had meant a lot to him, sure, but when he said, "No one's ever done that for me before," or he couldn't believe what I'd done, hear me on this, he wasn't talking about taking a photo. That was 5 years ago. And to this day, Chuck and I are still friends. We email back and forth. That's our form of communication quite frequently. Usually it's because he's sending me a coupon to one of his favorite places in Springfield. He always says his first favorite word is free, and the second favorite word of his is cheap. We could probably relate to that a lot. And he said that if there's ever a chance that he can go to Applebee's, he's just thrilled. So we usually go there as much as we can, whenever we can hang out. And every waiter and waitress in an Applebee's in Springfield knows the story of when we first met. Do you know Kolesen? Listen, do you know this guy? Or if you see someone with an FFA shirt, you'll pause him and say, listen, look, this kid, I went to the school I graduated from, and I came back because there was another grand opening, and this kid laid down on the ground. Laid down on the ground. Can you believe that? Insane. We asked ourselves what the point of all of this was earlier, the why. Have you ever done something that seemed so small to you, but meant the world to another? Because that moment never started with Chuck laying down, or myself laying on the ground. It never started with me taking the picture. It never started with our conversation that we had. It never started with any of that. It started with a choice. It started with a decision to be available to the needs of one stranger who just happened to turn out to become a lifelong friend. Something so small, but means the world to another. A great example of this. Tess Seibel, my friend, my teammate, and her project Embrace Fully, where she chooses to reach out to people around her all over the country to send kind letters and notes of encouragement. And amongst all these small, kind acts, small but the world to another, there's a common theme that's just woven into the fabric of each of them. Availability is best expressed in small acts of humility. Availability is best expressed in small acts of humility. Making ourselves available to love, available to listen, available to understand, available to forgive, available to clothe ourselves in a radical sense of compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. Those are the moments that count, Ohio FFA, and those are the qualities of leadership that an FFA member can possess. But how can we make this a reality in our own life? How can we find the Chucks and the Tylers of the world around us? And I want you to go with me one final time on this adventure here, and I recently came across this good wisdom, and I want you to picture a room, 4 walls, okay? Wherever you might be right now. Walk into that room. This room is filled with the same people who are having this discussion right here. Everyone in that room trying to outserve one another. Can you picture that? Can you imagine a room filled with humble people who count others as more significant than themselves? When servants gather together, everyone in that room is lifted up. Everyone in that room is lifted up. We may never know the times where we had failed to be there for someone, that big camera reel, but we do remember the times where we gave the time and chose to make ourselves available to the needs of someone around us. And we've seen how it directly impacted not just their life, that human being, drop everything else, that human being right there, but also how it impacted us in our own life. So let's take the reality of the world around us. No one, my friend, is expecting you to be the best listener, the best friend, the best son or daughter, the best parent, the best teacher. No one in this world is looking for your ability. They are simply looking and asking for your availability. Today, we, you and I, can choose to make ourselves available to the needs, big or small, of the people around us, to live out that wisdom held by Major General Arnie Fields, that a life of service is a life that counts. Let's realize today that there's always time in our day for something important. Make ourselves available to it and realize the best place to start is one simple, one small, one kind act of humility. That is the truest quality of leadership an FFA member can possess, and I strongly believe it's a quality that all of us beyond this organization can possess.